That feeling that something is missing, even when the job is good, the relationship is stable, the life looks fine from the outside, that is not a flaw in your wiring. It is not depression. It is not ingratitude. It is information. And the reason nobody has been able to talk you out of it is because the standard explanations are pointing at the wrong problem entirely. In this video, I'll show you number one, why doing all the right things, therapy, journaling, exercise, goals still leaves some people feeling completely empty, and what is actually driving that number two, what Vedic psychology calls the specific state, why it has a name and a roadmap, and why that changes everything about how you respond to it. Number three, the one daily practice rooted in both ancient self inquiry and modern neuroscience that breaks the lostness loop without requiring you to blow up your life. Let's get into it. A man I'll call David, mid 30s, reached out after watching one of our earlier videos. He had done everything right. Promotion at 32, bought the house, good marriage. He told me, I barely recognize myself anymore. I used to be energetic and happy, but now I can't find the energy to even try. He wasn't in crisis. He wasn't clinically depressed. He was just, as he put it, waiting for days to go by. The therapist said he had nothing to be unhappy about. The journaling wasn't surfacing anything new. He had optimized every outer metric and still felt like a stranger inside his own life. That is exactly the situation this video is built for. David is not unusual. The comments on videos about feeling lost in life are full of people saying the same thing in different words. Everyone around me has it all figured out while I'm stuck in a rut without a clear purpose, just waiting for days to go by. You know you truly don't care when you look at the small things that used to make you feel alive and just feel numb. These are not people who skipped therapy. They are not people who refuse to do the work. Many of them have done enormous amounts of work, and yet the emptiness persists. The reason the standard toolkit, goals, habits, therapy, mindfulness apps often fails to resolve this specific feeling is that it is treating a symptom while leaving the root untouched. Viktor Frankl noticed this in his clinical work. He called it existential vacuum, a condition where a person has removed all the obvious causes of suffering and still experiences a profound sense of meaninglessness. Irvin Yalom, one of the most respected existential psychologists of the 20th century, spent decades documenting the same thing. The emptiness is not caused by what is happening in your life. It is caused by a mismatch between who you believe yourself to be and who you actually are at a deeper level. Think about what the modern self improvement framework assumes. It assumes that you are primarily a set of behaviors, habits, and beliefs that can be updated. Change the inputs, change the outputs, and that works for a lot of things. It works for productivity, it works for fitness, it works for certain kinds of anxiety. But feeling lost in life, the specific kind David described, is not a behavior problem. It is an identity problem at the deepest possible level. And you cannot solve an identity problem by optimizing behaviors. The Vedic texts identified this centuries ago. They described a state called avidya, which is usually translated as ignorance, but a more precise translation is misidentification, not stupidity, not lack of information, misidentification, the confusion of the temporary constructed self, the one built from job titles and relationships and social roles, with the actual self that exists underneath all of that. And the critical insight is this: the discomfort you feel is not random, it is the deeper self signaling that the constructed identity no longer fits. The way a shoe that is slightly too small does not hurt until you have been walking in it for hours. You adapted, you compensated, and then one day you just cannot take another step. The takeaway from this section is not that something is wrong with you. The takeaway is that the emptiness is accurate. It is your inner compass telling you that you have been navigating by the wrong map. That reframe alone matters because most people spend years trying to fix a signal they should be learning to read. When David first heard the word avidya, his reaction was what most people's reaction is. He thought it was a diagnosis, something to be cured. But that is not how the Vedic framework treats it. The Vedic map of the self is not a hierarchy of problems to be fixed. It is a map of stages. And the stage David was in, the stage where the old identity has stopped working, but the new one has not yet clarified, has a name. It is called Vairagya. It is usually translated as dispassion or detachment, but in context it means something more specific: the natural loosening of attachment to a false self before Dharmu, one's actual purpose and nature, becomes clear. This is not a metaphor. This is a described, recognized, expected stage in the development of self understanding. The Bhagavata Purana and the Bhagavad Gita both address it directly. The Gita opens famously with Arjuna in complete paralysis. He cannot move. He cannot act. Everything he thought he was, a warrior, a son, a brother, a leader, has collapsed into contradiction. And Krishna does not tell him to push through it or think positively. He tells him to understand the nature of the self first, because without that understanding, all action is just noise. Now, here is why the name matters. When you do not have a name for what you are experiencing, you pathologize it. You assume it is depression or laziness or ingratitude or a sign that you made the wrong choices. You treat it as a problem to be eliminated. And so you double down on the very behaviors that are not working: more goals, more optimization, more trying to fix the constructed self, instead of questioning whether that self was ever the right foundation. But when you understand that what you are in is a recognized stage, one that has a beginning, a middle, and a direction, the relationship to the discomfort changes entirely. You stop fighting it, you start getting curious about it. Modern neuroscience has caught up to this in interesting ways. Research on the brain's default mode network, the network that activates when you're not focused on an external task, shows that this is where the brain processes identity. It is where the sense of self is constructed and updated. And what the research shows is that when a person's identity is under pressure, when the constructed self is being questioned, the default mode network goes into high activation. It is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, running an identity audit. The Vedic sages did not have fMRI machines, but they described the same process. They called it svadhyaya, which translates as self-study or self-inquiry, not self-improvement, not self-optimization, self-inquiry, the practice of turning attention inward, not to fix anything, but to observe what is actually there beneath the constructed layers. The feeling lost in life that David described is not evidence that he is broken. It is evidence that his default mode network is doing a full identity audit and the constructed self is not passing the test. That is not a crisis, that is a threshold. Most advice for feeling lost in life assumes that the solution is external. Find your passion, set bigger goals, change careers, move cities, and sometimes those things are necessary, but they are often just rearranging the furniture in the same house. The Vedic solution is structurally different. It says, before you change anything on the outside, change the direction of your attention, not permanently, not in a way that requires you to quit your job or join a monastery. For a specific window of time each day, you stop adding inputs and you start observing what is already there. This is Svadhyaya in practice, and the way it works, stripped of all ritual, is this. You take 10 to 15 minutes, ideally in the morning, before the day's demands start pulling your attention outward. You sit without an agenda, no journaling prompt, no gratitude list, no affirmation. You simply ask one question and then you wait. What do I actually value? Not what I have been told to value, not what my role requires me to value, but what actually matters to me when I strip away the performance. This sounds almost too simple. David's first response when I described it was, I've tried meditation, it didn't do anything. But Svadhyaya is not meditation in the way most people practice it. Most meditation is about quieting the mind. Svadhyaya is about interrogating the mind. There is a difference between sitting in silence and sitting in inquiry. The specific question matters. What do I actually value? Bypasses the ego's standard defenses because it is not asking you to change anything. It is not asking you to commit to anything. It is just asking you to look. And when you look consistently over days and weeks, patterns emerge, values surface that the constructed identity had been suppressing. The gap between those values and how you are actually living becomes visible, and visibility is the beginning of movement. The default mode network research supports this directly. Studies on identity consolidation show that the brain resolves identity conflict not through more external information, but through internal processing time. The people who recover a sense of self coherence after periods of feeling lost are not the ones who made the most dramatic external changes. They are the ones who gave their default mode network the unstructured time it needed to run its audit without interruption. That is what Svadhyaya provides: scheduled, intentional, uninterrupted inward attention, not navel gazing, not rumination. Inquiry with a specific question as the anchor. The Bhagavad Gita describes this as the difference between the person who acts from the surface and the person who acts from the center. Acting from the surface means responding to what the world expects of you. Acting from the center means responding to what you actually are. The first produces a life that looks right. The second produces a life that feels right. David started the Svadhyaya practice for 2 weeks before he noticed anything. Then he told me he had written one sentence in his notebook that changed his frame completely. He wrote, "I have been performing competence for so long that I forgot what I am actually curious about." That sentence did not come from a prompt, it came from the inquiry, and it pointed him toward a direction, not a destination, but a direction that no amount of goal setting had ever surfaced. The practice is this: 10 to 15 minutes each morning, no agenda, one question: what do I actually value? Write down whatever surfaces without editing it. Do not try to act on it immediately, just watch the pattern across 7 to 14 days. What shows up repeatedly is not noise, it is signal. That practice works. But for some people, after weeks of inquiry, the question shifts from "what do I value" to "what do I do with this?" And that is where it helps to have a real conversation. If you have tried the internal work on your own and you are still stuck at the point where you can see the gap, but you cannot figure out how to move across it, the fastest way through that is not another video. It is a direct conversation about your specific situation. I offer a free 30-minute consultation call. No pitch, no agenda, except to understand where you are and help you get clear on the exact next step for your situation. You will walk away from that call with a concrete direction, whether we ever work together or not. The link to book is in the description at dailymindreset.com to your consultation. If you have been waiting for days to go by, hoping the feeling passes, that call is the thing to do next. Subscribe if you want more of this. We go deep on the ideas that actually move the needle. Tell me in the comments, when you ask yourself, what do I actually value? What is the first thing that surfaces, even if it surprises you?